Hello ladies and gentlemen, this is Blue Maxima, and I'm going to talk to you for a bit about Half-Life Alyx, because I played Half-Life Alyx. I played it all the way through on launch day, and I'm actually surprised my feet don't hurt as much as I thought they would this morning, because I'm recording this the day after that I played it. And it is a very interesting game, I will admit, for more reasons than the obvious. Like, not only is it a big VR game, not only is it a game from Valve, but it's the sort of continuation of Half-Life, which is something you never think you'd see, right? Like, isn't that all of the major games the entire games industry is waiting for at this point? We got Shenmue 3, we have a Half-Life sequel, we have the Final Fantasy VII remake. It's like, what else do we have at this point? But anyway, it is a VR game, and the first thing I'm going to point out is that the changes that they made to the VR spectator mode that runs in the main window on your computer are fantastic. I am legitimately surprised that they went to this much effort when they were working on making it so that people could actually watch through the desktop monitor. The overwhelming quality of it, the ability to smooth out the camera, the ability to change the size of the heads-up display, and just the fact that it just works. So many VR games are almost impossible to record properly because it's just a massive pain in the ass trying to get them set up right. But this game, it was literally the same as recording a regular old PC game. It runs on one monitor, it plays sound through the speakers, and you can just go without a problem whatsoever. I recorded a few hours of footage from early on, and this is what that footage is. There's no spoilers in this footage, but frankly, nothing story relevant happens until like the last 2 hours of the game anyway, so it's not like it really matters too much. It's mainly just for, at least the early bits, gameplay. And admittedly, I appreciate that a lot, because this is, like, in a VR game, you kind of want a lot of focus on the gameplay itself, because it is definitely notable that a lot of VR games are quite jank and spend a lot of time focusing on how good they look and not on really how much they play. But thankfully, Half-Life Alyx knows exactly where the balance is, but somehow still manages to look fucking gorgeous in the process. Like, look at it. It's kind of let down by a bit by the fact that it's not one continuous world. It definitely does that whole Half-Life thing where the stages are split like every 15 to 20 minutes and you have to wait for a load screen between them. But it makes up for that by being literally gorgeous. It's got to be one of the best VR games, the best looking VR games I've ever seen. If not the best looking VR games I've ever seen. The effects are great, the overall quality of the models and the texture work is wonderful. It does look exactly like City 17. I have played Half-Life 2 and its episodes, and yes, it does look exactly like City 17, but given a really nice coat of paint. And the Combine look like the Combine, the Vortigons look like the Vortigons, and everything just looks as it's supposed to, especially when you run across the old red explosive barrels and you think to yourself, oh, that's cute. Or the wooden barrels, or even like one that kind of surprised me that I remembered, that there's this one particular kind of fence where it's like straight on one end, but then it bends inwards like something really heavy has crashed into the top left corner and permanently bent the fence. And even that looks exactly how it's supposed to, and it's actually fantastic. Like, I don't know if they did all of that just for like nostalgia's sake, or if they were trying to maintain as close a look to the original Half-Life 2 assets as possible. But I gotta tell you, man, they did it, and they did it pretty damn well. It also sounds pretty good. Everything sounds as it should. Honestly, a head crab sound, just as it's about to bite you in the face, sounds exactly as it's supposed to. Everybody sounds pretty damn close. I mean, they've got different voice actors for a lot of the different characters, but I know that a couple of the characters that we know about definitely sound exactly how they're supposed to, which is good. So I'm not going to say anything about that, but the sound design is great as well. You can definitely tell what direction a head crab is about to jump at you at, and that I really do appreciate. Oh yeah, I should really point out before we continue on, for those of you who are wondering what headset I played this on, because there are a ton of different headsets you can play this on, I played this on an Oculus Quest with wireless streaming via virtual desktop, and There is another solution, which is ALVR, which is free, but that solution actually broke for me, and it was never particularly stable to begin with. But I ended up picking up Virtual Desktop because ALVR just stopped working entirely for me, and I couldn't figure out what was wrong with it. But Virtual Desktop actually worked fantastically out of the box for Half-Life Alyx. It's known for having compatibility issues with certain games, like I couldn't play Beat Saber on it to save my life, but games like Pavlov worked absolutely fine. And Half-Life Alyx is in that worked absolutely fine category. I had to turn off sliced encoding because it was causing some issues, but once I did that, the game itself worked fantastically. Everything worked as expected, more or less. So I was able to play through the entire game practically wirelessly, although considering I played through the entire thing in one day, I did have to play a lot of it on the power cord plugged into the wall because the Oculus Quest battery does not last that long. It does not last the amount of time it took me to get through this game, which is 10 hours. Admittedly, some people got through it a bit quicker, and it's mainly because I got stuck on a couple of surprisingly frustrating points. Like, there's this one puzzle really late on in the game that it took me half an hour to figure out, and I only figured it out because I went and looked at a walkthrough. Because, here's the thing, there's this one particular control panel room in Chapter 10 where there is a block of wood blocking a very important piece of a control panel that you can't see if you don't actively turn around and look in the corner. And I didn't turn around and look in the corner because I didn't think of turning around and looking in the corner. I basically just immediately walked out of the room and snap-turned my way out. So I completely missed it the first 3 times I wandered into that goddamn control room, but as soon as I looked it up on the internet, it was like, oh yeah, that's where it fucking was. Of course that's where it was. But yeah, 9, 10, 11 hours was about how long I took. I played it on normal difficulty. There is a hard difficulty, and you could probably add a couple of extra hours on top for that. So, let's talk about the actual gameplay. It's a horror game. There's basically no getting around it. It's practically gone full-on survival horror at this point, especially with a few sections in the middle of the game that basically have you avoiding unkillable threats, more or less. And it is definitely effective as a survival horror game. They've done some, as I said before, with the graphics, they've done some fantastic job with the lighting to make it really dark and moody. In fact, there's this setting on the Oculus Quest virtual desktop software that actually makes darks darker and light colors lighter. I had to turn that off because I couldn't fucking see. That was interesting. There are a ton of, like, situations where you have to pull out a flashlight, and they've done some fantastic work with the flashlight as well to really keep the atmosphere nice and dreadful. And the overall quality of the survival horror aspects, as in finding ammo everywhere, making sure that there isn't a headcrab around the corner about to shoot you, it's all really well done. Just the overall atmosphere is top notch. It is kind of brought into the light a little bit when you're fighting off waves of combined soldiers, but, you know, you kind of expect that in a Half-Life game. Not something particularly out of the ordinary, I gotta say, although I gotta admit, taking out main hacks is kind of frustrating, especially since you don't get any melee attacks. You have to do everything via guns, which is a little bit weird. It'd be nice if you were able to smack people in the head with your gun, but I guess that's just something we have to deal with. So, let's talk about the actual gameplay. So it's a VR game, so you have to be doing a lot of moving around, and by moving around I mean you have to either teleport or you have to use free locomotion. I mainly used free locomotion, but when there was an area that I had to dash to, I basically used the teleport function because the teleport function just works a lot faster. But you basically have to navigate your way around these areas, doing simple puzzles with things like electronics in the wall or hacking stuff. And there's a lot of hacking puzzles in this game, and by the end I was getting kind of sick of them because they're all pretty repetitive and they can be kind of hard to control, especially when you get the ones that are on the bloody globes that you have to guide stuff across the surface. They can be really frustrating to deal with. But anyway, you basically have to wander around, look for resources, and, well, shoot zombies. And the whole exploring bit is encouraged by not only finding bits of ammo hiding in, like, crates and around corners and in things like little, like, crates and stuff like that, and you can find just by picking up and shaking off, but there are also pieces of resin that you can use to upgrade your 3 weapons. And you need, like, tons of resin to get all the upgrades. We're talking, you need something like 300 resin, and they're all single pieces. So you absolutely do need to be looking around in order to make your weapons more useful. And thankfully, it's all helped out by the fact that the game's got this absolutely fantastic little mechanic called gravity gloves. Now, the gravity gloves are incredibly simple to use. So, in any object that's within reach, that's not particularly heavy, like, say, a barrel or something like that, you can point at it, hold the grip button, and then pull. And it will fling the object in question at you, at which you can grab it out of the air. It's kind of weird for like the first 2 or 3 times you use it. It's a little bit weird to get used to because you gotta grab the trigger button, pull, let go of the trigger button, and then grab the grip button. You gotta grip, pull, let go of grip, and then grip again when the object is within your reach. But once you get used to it, it's one of the most satisfying things I've ever had the pleasure of using in a video game. Because it is so inherently satisfying, because there's a few things they've done. The curve of the object towards you is perfect. Most of the time, like, there are times where you have to flick the object in order to make it so that it falls onto, like, a different thing to the side of it, and then, like, falls down so it's within your reach. But most of the time, you grab on the object, you pull it towards you, and it's always on a very predictable angle. So you'll know exactly when it's going to be in your hand to grab it. The second is that there's a unique sound effect for every stage of the process. There's a stage for gripping it from long distance, there's a stage for flicking it, there's a stage for gripping it again, and it's all very obvious when you've successfully managed to pull it off. And it makes it so satisfying to see, like, an ammo clip 20 foot across the room with 2 trip wires. You aim your glove very specifically, you grip, you pull, it flings between the 2 trip mines, and then you grip it as it comes through, and then you stick it in your backpack. It is immensely satisfying, which is good because it's literally one of the 3 main things you do during this, and the other 2 main things are moving and shooting, and, well, 3 things. Moving, shooting, and reloading. And reloading is very simple. You just pull the clips out of your backpack and stick them in the same way you would with any other VR shooter. It's actually surprisingly thin on the ground, but at the same time, there are a lot of things about this game that are thin on the ground. As I said, there's no melee attacks. There's very little in the way of body kinetics, a la Boneworks. If you've played Boneworks, you'll know exactly what I mean, where they basically emulate every single limb and little extremity on your body, and it can be a bit disorientating from time to time because it's hard to just figure out how exactly you need to go about it, especially since you have no control over your legs. Half-Life Alyx pulls back on this a little bit and brings it down to the bare essentials. You only do things with your hands, you do things like reloading with very simple motions, you are able to do things like brush things out of the way with your hand but not your arm, and of course you got the things like teleporting, which you can actually use to do things like, you do have the ability to crouch down and walk under objects, but you also have the ability to just teleport through them, which is a nice touch. And it's all very simple. If you've played VR games before, you'll know exactly what this is all like, but at the same time, if you've played VR games before, you'll also be able to appreciate just how they made the decisions on what to cut and what not to cut, and the entirety of the whole solution works really well with each other. All the motions flow into each other nice and simply. There's no real, like, massively wonky thing about the entire solution that makes it all feel just unwieldy. It's all just really well put together. It's a well done jigsaw where every single piece plays its part, and it is absolutely one of the least janky VR games I've ever played. There are some situations where there are, like, physics puzzles that you have to do, though, and sometimes those can get a little wonky. Like, I've had some, like, pieces of resin just shoot into the nether because I tried to pick up the box they were in, and everything just vibrated like crazy and just went, boop, gone, bye. And there are also a couple of situations where you can do things like get stuck in corners and stuff like that. But, I mean, considering the fact that I actually replayed Half-Life 2 Episode 2 before I dived into Half-Life Alyx, that Strider battle at the very end of Half-Life 2 Episode 2 is fucking obnoxious, by the way. But the overall, like, everything about the way the game moves, talks, and shoots and what have you is very similar to Half-Life 2 Episode 2, even the physics bugs. So it's very clear that this is on an enhanced version of the Source engine. They say it's on Source 2, but I mean, they had to have built it from the original Source engine in some way, and it definitely does feel like it came straight from the Source engine. So, I'm not saying that's a bad thing. I mean, it kind of is a bad thing that it can be a little bit wonky sometimes, but the fact that it is ever so, like, the fact that it is as good as it is, and that the wonky times are the exception and not the rule, means that they've done a really good job at polishing everything so that everything is satisfying. You can also play this game sitting down if you need to. It works absolutely fine if you do that, because again, it only relies on your hands. There are also some neat things you can do with the engine, like you can put things on your face and on your head. I don't know if that saves you from getting hit by a, what's the bloody name of them? The barnacles. I don't know if it saves you from getting hit by the barnacles, but well, it'd be nice if it did, and the gas mask actually does have an effect, which I won't say here for spoiler reasons, but anyway. So, there is also shooting. You have to shoot zombies, you have to shoot head crabs, of course you have to shoot Combine, and not the best shooting I've ever played in a VR game, if I'm being perfectly honest. As I said before, it's a piece of a puzzle, and keeping it as uncomplicated as possible, and keeping it so that it can just circle in with all of the rest of the mechanics that the game has on hand is like the main focus of this game, and I appreciate it for that. But the three weapons that they give you, which are a pistol, a shotgun, and an SMG, are all a bit weird in their own way. I appreciated the pistol the most because it's the easiest to be accurate with, and it is entirely possible to round a corner with a shotgun and just blow some guy's face off, but the SMG in particular, I just didn't like, because it feels like it has absolutely no impact whatsoever. At least with the pistol, you get a little bit of recoil with it, and with the shotgun, you can very clearly see its knockback and watch the shell fly out of it. But the SMG in particular is just like a bit of a whiffer. You just point it and shoot and hope for the best. I was basically just like pointing and just pulling the trigger for a couple of bullets so that the inaccuracy didn't get too high, and just kind of yawning most of the time that I was using it, because it's just not that interesting of a weapon. And the pistol and the shotgun is something else, though. But admittedly, those are still satisfying to use, and it's kind of let down by the fact that a lot of the enemies don't actually recoil that much. Like, the head crabs and the zombies in particular basically have no reactions to anything until they die. The Combine do actually have, like, pain states and what have you if you hit them enough, but yeah, they just kind of flinch as well. It's not fantastic, but the combat is still pretty serviceable, and being able to do things like hide behind cover, you've got grenades as well to throw out, although I do recommend getting the grenade launcher attachment for the shotgun, because it makes grenades way more useful for reasons I will get into shortly. But the overall gunplay is alright. I got no actual problem with it, and I've seen worse in other VR games. I'm just saying that it's not, like, amazing. It's fun. It's serviceable. And, like, especially getting certain headshots with weapons like the 3-shot burst with the pistol is actually pretty satisfying, but it's still not the best I've ever played. I was hoping for slightly better, especially since you've got Half-Life 2 with, like, a massive selection of weapons for long range and medium range and short range and all that. Getting 3 weapons, 2 of which are basically dedicated to short range, is a little bit disappointing, but it still works okay as is. What I do want to give special props to, though, is the level design. The goddamn level design of this game is brilliant. At least until you get to the last chapter, but we'll save that for a bit. So, there are a lot of situations in this game where you'll go through an area and it will slowly introduce you to a concept, whether it be explosive barrels, whether it be certain things that you can't walk into without alerting something, certain things that you just can't do, right? And then it'll, certain things like infinitely spawning head crabs that are being eaten up by barnacles. It'll send you through, like, little situations early on that'll get you used to little things like that, right? Then it'll turn the entire situation on its head and bring you into an entirely different area with a fully different set of challenges that will instantly be recognizable as, quote, a bad thing. I mean, that's exactly what I said when I first came into one of these situations. It's a bad thing. Let me explain one of these areas to you. I'm going to try and find it in my footage, but I've got 3.5 hours of footage here that I need to go through. It might be a little bit difficult for me to find it, but there's this one situation early on in the game where you're first introduced to it, where you got zombies that get introduced to you, then you've got your little explosive canisters, then you've got your barnacles, and then you've got like a combination of all three. So you can pick up explosive canisters, throw them at the zombies, and then shoot them to like detonate them or something like that, right? Then you walk into an area, there's a door with a missing turn wheel that you need to go into. That's fine. Then you walk into an area that has tons of explosives surrounding it. That's fine too. Then you realize you've got to shoot zombies while you're doing that. So you basically can't use your shotgun in this room. That's also okay, I suppose, if you walked into the room with enough ammo. Then you get to the very end, and it scares the shit out of you. Because there's a dead, well, there's not a dead zombie. There's a zombie lying in the background. There's an explosive canister in the middle of a room that's full of explosive canisters. Then this explosive canister is being held up in the air by a sleeping barnacle. And as soon as you get close, it'll start pulling up the explosive. The game has already shown you what happens if a barnacle pulls up an explosive canister. So you know the situation immediately.
Well, I think that given our situation,
You know that there is a barnacle that's going to kill you if it pulls that up. But if you get too close and start shooting at the barnacle, the zombie will get up and start approaching you. The game pulls situations like this constantly, where it slowly introduces elements to you, then throws them all together in an oh shit situation that makes you think, oh god, what the hell am I going to do about this? It does this all the time and it's brilliant. It is legitimately great how many times they can pull together situations like this out of thin air. And it is what, like, mostly what kept me engaged in Half-Life Alyx all the time that I was playing it. Because you think to yourself, after you play through that scene, how the hell are they going to use this, and this together to make something interesting? And they always make something interesting of it, and it's what kept me playing the game the most, because you never know what they're going to throw at you. It's also made interesting by the fact that there's going to be all sorts of little nooks and crannies that you can search for, the resin that I was talking about earlier, that you need to often do really specific things to do. There's this one section where you basically have to be constantly running back and forth, trying to figure out physics puzzles to get resin to you, otherwise you're going to get yourself killed. I'm trying to keep spoilers for anything past like chapter 5 as like, you know, vague as possible, but yeah, there are certain things that you need to do while under pressure or trying to figure out like how you're supposed to get around a certain set of obstacles to get to it. And they've got tons of these little puzzles to get things like resin, and it's, again, just the level design in this game is just fantastic. They've constantly got you finding your way around certain things. The puzzles with like electricity in the wall are also great as well, because it is entirely possible to trick yourself if you're not paying close attention. There are all sorts of like little neat touches to the design that I thoroughly appreciate. And there's one that I really wish that they did more of. So there's this one situation where if you pick up a floppy disk that says 50 free games for £3.50 on it, you actually get a little monologue from the support character in the game, Russell, who just gives you this little monologue about how the world used to be back in the day. And he does that a fair bit early on, but he starts not doing it later on. And it's like, I was a little bit disappointed at it, because I was actually really enjoying finding random objects that were telling me about the world of Half-Life, because the world of Half-Life is actually interesting. We screwed up an experiment which led to an alien invasion, and now you've got like 3 different species of aliens and humans all trying to fight either each other or ally with each other on this crazy screwed up Earth. And I'd like to hear like more about the world and people who lived through the like original invasion and what have you. But yeah, they just don't do that very often because it gets very story-focused in the later half of the game. So, a little bit disappointing in that sense, but I will at least say that Russell, the support character, is actually a good character. I appreciate pretty much everything he has to say. There is not one situation which doesn't feel, like, enjoyable when he's involved in it. Everything from trying to walk you through a dark area, to trying to get his own personal man hack to work, to going on about the how much everybody hates and loves vodka at the same time. He's a very intelligently written character, and I thoroughly appreciate every single time he's in my ear. Which, again, is disappointing, because he doesn't start talking about, like, anything in particular, except, like, the mission and the story towards the end of the game. And that's what I was just so disappointed, because I didn't get to hear any of his random rants about anything. But yeah, really well-written character. You don't hear from Eli or Alyx anywhere near as much, actually. He's the main voice in your head throughout the majority of the game, but, I mean, those two do fit their characters as much, but at the same time, they... From what I remember of, like, the original Half-Life games and Half-Life 2 Episode 2, which I played through for this, and they just don't seem to have that much going for them in terms of, like, character depth. I don't know if this is something that I've missed or not, but especially in Half-Life Alyx, most of their conversation is, I love you, Dad, I love you too, honey. That is most of their relationship and their conversations in this game, so... You don't really learn that much about either character, well, except for the spoiler bits, obviously, but, yeah. The one part where I think the level design kind of falls apart is the final chapter. And again, without getting into spoilers about the final chapter too much, in story-wise anyway, the main part of the final chapter is walking you through this psychedelic maze that is just, it kind of feels like it's against the point. I don't know if it's just me being jaded because I've seen so many things like it before. It feels like a weak rip-off of that one bit of Inception. And if you know that one bit of Inception, you know exactly what I'm talking about. It feels like a cheap rip-off of that. And then you get into the second half, which is focused entirely on the throwing controls. And I gotta tell ya, throwing controls in VR have never been particularly good. I own a PSVR, I own a Windows Mixed Reality headset, which is a PC headset, and I own an Oculus Quest, which is both standalone and usable on PC. None of them have gotten throwing right, and Half-Life Alyx is like also one of the games that hasn't gotten throwing right. I've tried so hard to get the throwing right. I've tried using grenades as an effective offensive tool. I've tried using them in the little segment that they've got going there. And there's even another thing that they do that you use with the same controls as the throwing, and it still manages to be a massive pain in the ass. I was trying to... Like, I spent 15 minutes trying to set off a trip mine from long range by throwing stuff at it, but I could never get even, like, the smallest cans to go beyond a few feet in front of me just because throwing is bullshit in VR. No one has figured out how to do it properly yet, and I really wish they figured out another solution for it. But yeah, the last level is just really... The last level is just a slap in the face in comparison to the rest of the levels in the game, which, as I said before, really well designed, tons of little nooks and crannies, tons of interesting puzzles and situations to get yourself out of, except for like one or two situations, like as I was talking about earlier, the block of wood hiding an important puzzle item, but yeah. I guess the last thing I should talk about is the overall performance of the game, and the Source engine seems to run pretty damn well, because I was running the game at some pretty high settings, and I was only playing the game at 72 Hz, because that's the only frame rate you really need to play this game at on the Oculus Quest when you're streaming it. But judging by the Steam VR performance graph thing that you can have, it was actually running really well, to the point where I probably could have pushed the same sort of performance and almost hit that 144 Hz mark that the Valve Index supports. So it is actually a very well optimized game, and they do have some pretty decent settings for you to go change just in case you need to actually fix that. So that is really well done. There are a couple of technical problems with the PC version. I imagine these will get sorted out. The subtitles were never on sync for me. I don't know why. This might have been a result of like sound delay from the computer to my thing, but I didn't really notice if there was any sound delay, but the subtitles were never in sync for me. It was always a line or two in front or behind. And, what was the other thing that I ran into a lot? Oh yeah, the quick turning thing doesn't work, but I imagine that's going to, be fixed. I mean, snap turning works, but you have an option to turn snap turning off, but that doesn't actually do anything, so you can't smooth turn yet, but thankfully I was able to just, like, turn, because Oculus Quest, no wires, so nothing to worry about getting tangled up in, but that's just me. People who are using dedicated VR headsets for computers specifically will probably have a problem with that, but I imagine they'll patch that in due time. So, my overall thoughts about Half-Life Alyx. It looks and sounds fantastic. It plays really well. It's got nothing that VR owners have never seen before, except for that absolutely fantastic little grip and pull mechanic. The level design is great, and the gameplay and the level design are more than enough to make this game enjoyable enough to recommend. The overall camaraderie between you and the support character Russell is great. I wish there was a bit more of that, but unfortunately towards the second half of the game it gets a bit more related to the story in that sense. The overall performance of the game was also great. There are some niggles here and there that aren't particularly massive though and anything worth worrying about. And if you have a VR headset at all, you really probably should go play Half-Life Alyx. It is legitimately really good outside of its like little dips here and there. And I'm not going to say that this is a game that is going to like bring VR into the mainstream, because frankly that whole argument is kind of nonsense. Mainly due to the fact that its requirements are higher than most bloody games out there. Like, let me just go have a look at the requirements here. It's like a Core i5-7500, and a Ryzen 5 1600, 12 gigs of RAM, and a GTX 1060. That is some really high minimum requirements, by the way, because, yeah, that is just ridiculous. I do not think that being restricted to that kind of rig alone is not going to be the game that really pushes VR forward. It will definitely be a game for the enthusiasts to say, hey, look, this is how well you can do when you're really well done. You're probably looking towards a Beat Saber sort of game if you want to push the industry like that. But this is still a really well done game, and it probably will convince a lot of people that, hey, this shit is actually really cool. We should be trying to push this shit as much as humanly possible. But you know, there are always going to be a bunch of other people who are going to say, why can't we play this? Why do we have to have a VR headset for this? This game is going to be shit if it's in non-VR. I'm going to be perfectly honest with you right there. This game kind of relies on like the inherent weaknesses and strengths of VR to really work, so it's going to be quite disappointing if it turns out to... Well, I say it's going to be quite disappointing if it turns out to be played on flat screen. I mean in the sense that people are probably going to be disappointed if they don't play it in the way that it was initially meant to be played. But yeah, that's it. I'm not going to talk about the story because frankly I don't really think I'm in a position to. And there are a couple of things about it that make me think, you know, they say that this is going to be their return to the Half-Life universe. Let's hope they keep that promise, because seriously, they kind of want to. But anyway, this has been Blue Maxima. I'll let you watch some more footage of the game without me talking over it. I'll see you all next time.
Wait, is that a dead Combine soldier?
Yeah. When you guys were off stealing the reactor, I saw the Combine moving supplies in here. So, I guess they're interested in this place again.
Right, we'll keep an eye out. Something's definitely up. Alyx, manhack, watch out!
See it. Okay, so right now, what it's like to live on Earth on a scale of 1 to 10. I'd say we're at a 2.
Yep, could always get worse.
What would you rate it before the Combine showed up?
Ooh, that's a toughie. I don't know. Good day? I'd say 6. Yeah, strong 6.
6? That's not great.
Well, that's life, Alyx. You know, it's not always great.
Well, maybe we get the Combine off Earth and we could shoot for like an 8, you know?
Ooh, an 8. Yeah, that really would be nice. Really nice.
Holy fish. So, when we get the Combine off of Earth, what are you gonna do?
I'm going full production mode on the Russells, of course.
Oh, of course. You'll be sitting on a landmine.
Gold mine, yep. So here's the plan. Conservative estimate, I figure 1 year to get the world unconquered by the Combine, get them off the planet, so that's year 1. Then another year to mass produce the Russells. Although, just quietly, we will need to rebuild society first, you know, to get some basic infrastructure, jobs, money, that sort of thing. Otherwise people won't be able to buy them, you know. So, yeah, 3-year plan. Let's slot the infrastructure thing in for year 2.
Oh, yeah, definitely. You're gonna want to put that in year 2. Oh boy. Getting dark again.
Oh, careful, careful!
So, this whole 3-year Russell plan. You think you'd have a job for me?
Job? Alyx, you invented the Alyx. Of course you can have a job.
We could be partners.
Oh, well, Well, there would be stock options. 5 to 10 year vesting period, obviously. Could be very lucrative for you, Alyx, in the long term.
I don't know what any of that meant, but sounds good, partner.
Yep, sounds good. Alyx?
nobody left.
Alyx! Alyx? Alyx?
Three mags left. Combine. Russ, these guys have automatic weapons.
They're alien commandos. Of course they have automatic weapons. We'd have them soon, but Combine weapons are gene-coded, so out of luck. Unless you find one that's unbonded, or you're open to some minor genetic modification.
I'm good, Russ. I'm just gonna roll with these genes that I've got. Oh, I think that's the last of them.
Good, because we don't have much time.